Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 19th of August, 2021. All right, everyone, let's get into it. So, I think the biggest news of the last 24 hours was this white hat rescue from Samczun and co. Basically, I think it was 5 a.m. my time, around 5 a.m. my time. Samczun, who works at Paradigm as a researcher there, is very famous for a lot of the critical bugs that he's found in different smart contracts. I mean, I would probably say he is one of the best, if not the best, smart contract auditors on the planet in terms of like independent auditors of kind of like finding these public bugs and things like that. A lot of you will know who Samczun is, works at Paradigm, all that cool stuff there. But essentially at around 5 a.m., he put out this tweet that he said, just pulled off maybe the biggest white hat rescue ever, story time soon. Now, there was obviously a lot of speculation about what kind of project this affected, and basically there was a few people saying like different kind of like projects here, but then I think how long later, I think just an hour later, Samczun posted his blog post that he put together where he said he found a critical vulnerability in SushiSwap's MISO platform, which is like their fundraising platform, I believe. Now, the vulnerability itself is described in this kind of blog post, but what's also described is kind of like how it all played out, right, with a timeline and everything like that. And they managed to rescue $250 million worth of user funds. And what Samczun means by white hat, basically in cybersecurity, or I guess like in the hacker world, there is a bunch of different classifications. And the three most popular ones are black hat, gray hat, and white hat. Black hat is obviously if you're a hacker and you're just in it for profit. You don't care about basically anything else except making the money and exploiting the platform. So that's, you're a black hat if you do that. You're a white hat if you basically if you find a bug and then you kind of like report it, or you kind of save funds if that's within crypto, if that's what you want to do, then you're a white hat. And that's why Samczun said they pulled off the white hat rescue attempt of $250 million, because if he was a black hat, he could have just stolen that and been on his merry way. And then gray hat is kind of like sitting in the middle, where it's funny because gray hat's like it's like where people kind of debate what was white hat, what was black hat, and if they can't really decide on it, it's considered grey hat. It's like, morally questionable that they could have done, that they should do that or shouldn't do that. So those are the kind of like three distinct categories within that world there. But yeah, I mean, I think this is the biggest in terms of white hat effort. I think it beats out the DAO. Back in 2016, during the DAO event, there was a white hat recovery effort back then as well. But I think that was for less amount of dollar in terms of dollar terms than this one was with SushiSwap here. So, or maybe it was. I don't know the exact figures, but I believe it was less than what it was here. But yeah, I mean, really, really great that Samczun was able to do this, because if someone else came along and was a black hat, they could have stolen $250 million worth of, I think it was $250 million. Or 350 million or something like that, because they mentioned 350 million here, and then I saw the $250 million number thrown around. But essentially, yeah, I mean, it was an absolutely huge kind of hack potential here, right? Because essentially, as I said, like if someone else found this kind of bug before Samczun did or whatever, they would have been able to steal these funds. And it's funny because like we saw the biggest kind of like black hat or biggest DeFi hack the other day with the Poly network thing, where it was like $600-700 million or whatever it was, but some of that got returned, and I think pretty much all of it ended up getting returned. So would that be considered gray hat or whatever? I don't really believe so. Or white hat, that's where it gets kind of like funny. Is this person a gray hat now because yes, they were a black hat because they stole the funds, but now they've returned them in like a white hat fashion, so they're sitting in like the middle of the two. So it gets a bit funny when you talk about that there. But yeah, if you want to read the full details, you can read this blog post here. But I put out a tweet where I said, the irony of Paradigm saving SushiSwap is why I love this industry. And for those of you who don't know why, it's incredibly ironic that Paradigm was the one that saved SushiSwap, because I believe if this hack had happened and 250 or 350, whatever it was, $1 million was lost, then essentially that might have been the end of SushiSwap. Maybe not the total end, but like it would have definitely damaged Sushi a lot. A lot of users would have gotten hurt and everything like that. But the reason the irony exists is because I mean, it goes back to how SushiSwap came into existence. So I'll go through a little bit of history here. So Paradigm invested in, or was the first investor in Uniswap in early 2019. They invested $1 million back then and have been really close to the Uniswap team. And that's been like their darling for many, many years now. And kind of like they work with that team. Now, obviously, SushiSwap started off as a fork of Uniswap, and there's a bit of bad blood between the two teams because, like, obviously, Uniswap doesn't like the fact that the way SushiSwap was launched was that it was forked, and there was a vampire kind of attack on it. And then, you know, there's been a bit of beef on Twitter between Joseph DeLong, who's at Sushi, who I think I spoke about him the other day, and Hayden Adams at Uniswap, and just generally the Sushi and Uni community is kind of like beefing with each other. So the fact that I guess like Paradigm, you know, kind of like coming to the rescue of SushiSwap here is incredibly ironic and it's pretty funny. But I guess at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is these people are professionals. They're not, I mean, yes, there's beef. Yes, there's kind of like a little bit of bad blood, but it's not enough to push them to the edge of like being a black hat or whatever. And Samczun, I don't think would ever do that. Like, it's just funny because like everything he has done has been white hat, and it's so incredible that he's a white hat and not a black hat, because he could make, you know, so much money just going through these exploits and basically exploiting all these protocols or whatever. But I think that kind of game is reserved for a special kind of personal group. I think Samczun is definitely very different in that regard. But yeah, that's kind of like the breakdown there of the story and why it's ironic. And I'm just really glad to see that these funds were saved. I mean, none of my funds were in there, but maybe your funds were. But essentially, it's always very scary when like something that's considered a top DeFi project has a bug like this in it. And that's why, you know, you see a lot of these DeFi projects, they don't really introduce new features too often, and they move quite slowly when they do. I mean, Aave V2 took a little while to come out, but also it had like 5 separate audits on it. That I think they had like controlled measures in place for various different things. I think they definitely took their time there, and it's not just them, it's a bunch of other kind of protocols out there. Now, not to say that the SushiSwap team didn't take their time and try and get this stuff audited or looked at and things like that, but still, things can fall through the cracks, and you definitely want to have guardrails in place because for that reason. And that's why I've been talking about these layer 2s that are going to have guardrails in place as well, like Arbitrum and Optimism going live. Optimism right now with Uniswap V3 is limited to 50,000 transactions per day, right? So they're not obviously offering up the full scalability there. There's admin keys in place. They're the only ones running a sequencer. Same with Arbitrum. That's going to be this kind of same play there. But it's all done in kind of like the spirit of user security, which I think is very, very important. So yeah, there's the story of what happened today with SushiSwap and Paradigm. So I was asked by Matthew Graham in the Daily Gwei Discord channel to kind of like cover a little bit of, I don't know if I'd call it drama, but a little bit of changes happening within the index co-op community, or at least proposed changes. Now, for those who don't know, I gotta like have a disclaimer here. I am an advisor to Set. I used to work at Set as a product marketing manager, and Set is the original team along with DeFi Pulse that launched the index co-op back in September, I believe. I was part of that launch effort because I was still working at Set back then, and as I'm still an advisor, and of course I hold index tokens, I have, you know, conflicts of interest out the wazoo here with this sort of stuff. But I was asked nicely by Matt to cover this and try and be as objective as possible. So that's what I'm going to do. And you're gonna know why in a sec, why this is kind of like a sensitive topic. So essentially, a little bit of background, the index co-op community seems to want more autonomy. And what that means is basically they want to be able to do more as a kind of like separate thing to Set. They don't want to have to rely on Set, the core team at Set to do things like engineering work and all that sort of stuff. They don't want to have to kind of go for permission or like sign off on things. They want like full autonomy. And it's funny because this kind of like reminds me of how, you know, certain countries like break apart from I guess like the people who founded them. So for example, in Australia, we were kind of like colonized by people coming from the UK, right? But then we eventually broke off from them because we wanted to be our own kind of like sovereign nation. And it's kind of like the same thing that's happening here, right? Where the index co-op is basically saying, well, yes, we know the Set was like the founding fathers, so to speak, of this kind of movement here, or this, you know, this kind of protocol. But we want to kind of like have more autonomy. We want to be our own thing. We have all these community members, all these people, and we don't want to have to rely on Set as like our governing body, for example, right? So that's kind of like what this post goes over. And I'll leave this in the YouTube description. You can kind of go through this and go through the comments and everything like that. But as I guess like a follow on to this, there's been a kind of like a thing here of actually within kind of like this part of the autonomy stuff here was also the idea of, I guess, like fairness and the fairness of the token distribution. And that's what Matt Graham has gone through here, where he basically says that, Set Labs having 28% of the original index COP or index tokens is an issue because of the fact that, is that fair? Like, is Set doing 28% of the work? Are they responsible for 28% of the index co-op's continued success, right? Especially if they're going to take a more hands-off approach, which I haven't, I'm not, too close and on the metal with this sort of stuff. Like, I'm not in the kind of index co-op community day in, day out. I do follow this as much as I can, but essentially, what the kind of like the issue is that Set is definitely, or at least what the index co-op community is saying is that Set is definitely not providing 28% of the kind of like value here. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. Like, as I said, I'm not up to speed with the day-to-days of everything here, but essentially what Matt has said is we should basically renegotiate what Set Labs' share is of the total index tokens. And I think, he's gotten through a detailed analysis here and detailed description of why he thinks that this kind of like new distribution would be fairer and stuff like that. And he's basically put in this new distribution, Set Labs would get 14% of the tokens instead of 28%. So basically halving their allocation here. And then a bunch of other kind of like allocations. As I think the rest of it pretty much stays the same. Like DeFi Pulse is 2% like the original kind of thing. But essentially what happens is that the 14% that goes from Set Labs goes to a community kind of, I guess, portion, which is 14% and vests for vests over 1 to 3 years. Now, there's a poll here for like soft signaling from the community. It seems that pretty much everyone is in favor of kind of like some kind of, I guess, redistribution here, or at least revisiting the Genesis kind of distribution and changing it, or making it a priority in Q3 and all that sort of stuff there. So on that note, there was a protocol ownership kickoff group that has been formed. There's a bunch of authors here, very active community members in the index co-op, and essentially what they want to do is they want to, I guess, bring all of the key stakeholders together and come to an agreement with Set, the index co-op, the community members, all that sort of stuff on the best path forward here. Now, they've got the proposed next steps of what they want to do here. The proposed action is forming this kickoff group, and to form it correctly, they need a bunch of different people from different groups. So they want a lead. So this lead that they want, one unbiased third party, who is obviously doesn't have conflicts of interest and or at least it can be as unbiased as possible with Index Co-op and Set. And they also want 3 community contributor representatives. So, anyone from the Index Co-op community, especially the active members, and 1 Set Labs representative as well. So if you know anyone, or maybe you yourself think that you could fit in any of these positions, definitely kind of get involved here, either on the forum or maybe even reach out to Matthew Graham. He's pretty active in the Daily Gwei Discord channel there. But that's what they're kind of looking for, and I just wanted to give a shout out there that those kind of positions still need to be filled, especially this lead position, of an unbiased third party, someone who doesn't have, I guess, skin in the game with either Index Co-op or Set, and doesn't have a bias to any kind of team or project or whatever, and is just coming at this from the angle of, okay, how do we make this the most fair for everyone? And I'm not going to give my opinion on what's fair here, what I think about this, just because I can't be unbiased at all here. As I said, I'm an advisor to Set. I hold Index tokens. I was part of launching Index Co-op, so I have skin in the game in both kind of arenas here. And through my advisory with Set, I obviously have exposure to Set, Set the company, right, and by proxy have exposure to Set Labs' share in Index Co-op. So yeah, I can't really give my opinions on this in an unbiased way, but what I will say is that I actually think this is just a natural evolution of a DAO, because if you are a DAO that gets launched and you have all these community members that come together and they end up just doing more work, or at least an outsized portion of the work, and then the original party says, okay, well, we're going to take a step back. We want the community to be more autonomous. Well, to do that, you not only have to have I guess the social aspect to it, the community aspect to it, the organizational aspect, you also need the monetary aspect, because at the end of the day, if a portion of, I guess, like a DAO is feeling like they're undervalued or feeling like they're not getting what they're due, well, they're either going to leave or they're going to be angry or grow to resent a certain party or grow to resent like another kind of like portion of the DAO. And this doesn't just happen within DAOs, right? This happens everywhere. Like if you're working a full-time job and you find out that your peers who are doing the same job as you, right, are earning, say, like 50% more money than you each year, well, you're going to be like, whoa, wait, this is shitty. Like I'm doing the same amount of work as these people. I should be valued the same as them. And then this is why people kind of leave companies or they try to get like a pay rise or whatever. Like I experienced this, especially in the corporate world. Usually to move up in the corporate world, you have to keep changing companies. And I mean, might move up with kind of salary, because negotiating a pay rise is always really hard, and it's just like really disappointing that happens. But that is the reality of the situation, and that is I think what happens within DAOs, and what we're going to keep seeing within DAOs is that the original team shouldn't be getting like a huge portion of it if they're not putting in the work to do so. And it's kind of like a diametrically opposed thing, right? Where the original founding team started the DAO because they wanted it to be a community-owned thing. They wanted it to be a global organization with hundreds, potentially thousands of people participating actively within it to grow whatever the project is. But at the same time, they for that to be achieved, they have to take a step back. They can't be, I guess, like the kind of like CEO, CFO, CTO, like the leadership, the executive kind of branch of it. They have to be just one kind of part of the DAO, and to do that, they need to do that socially. But if they do that socially and with their kind of like with their actions, they also have to do that with their kind of like share of the pie. Because and like not in this scenario, but just generally, if you're not doing a X percentage of the work, then you don't deserve X percentage of the rewards. Is kind of like how I view it. Now, I don't know, as I said, I'm not like up to date with the day-to-days of the Index Corp and even SET. Like I'm still an advisor to them, but like advisor doesn't mean like I pay too much attention, to them every single day. I so much to keep up with. I can barely keep up with kind of stuff for the refuel, let alone that. But generally, I would say, like, this is the only thing I will say, is that I'm for this kind of discussion, and I'm hoping that it comes to a conclusion that satisfies all parties. And at this point in time, it's definitely looking like 28% maybe is too high, maybe not, who knows. But if SET really is kind of like not doing 28% of the work, well then, yeah, they don't deserve 28% of the reward. But at the same time, this sort of stuff happens in startups all the time as well, where people either kind of like leave or they end up doing less work and the company gets bigger, and you need to redistribute the rewards essentially. Because, as I said, if someone is doing the outsized portion of the work and they're not getting an outsized portion of the reward, they usually leave, or they usually kind of grow to resent something, or essentially become like disgruntled. And it's funny because this isn't just like unique to the Index Corp or like DAOs in general. This has played out many times throughout history, like not even just within crypto, but just like speaking from personal experience. It's funny for me because like with Ethereum, for example, I got in like, I mean, not late, but like early 2017, I bought my first ETH at $10. I didn't buy much because I didn't have much money back then. But, I kept buying on the way up and things like that. But there were plenty of people who bought, at the ICO, they bought at $1, whatever, and they haven't contributed nearly as much as I have to Ethereum. And yet if they had held their ETH from there, they would have like much more of a share of the pie than I have had. But the thing is that it's not just, I guess, like your ETH holding, it's everything else that comes along with it, right? But within a DAO, like Ethereum is like a big ecosystem, obviously, there's a lot of moving parts to it, and there's a lot of other stuff that goes on there. But within like a DAO, like the Index Co-op, and if you're directly paying these people to contribute, and it's their actual kind of like full-time job to contribute to the Index Co-op community, they should get a share in it. Like just like you would get like an equity share in a startup. If you were one of the early members there, you should definitely get a share in the, I guess, like equity distribution or the token distribution or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how this pans out and seeing what the kind of like, I guess, what everyone lands on here. But again, I just like a shout out that they're still looking for a lead, which is an unbiased third party, 3 community contributor representatives. I'm pretty sure these will be easy to find. There are obviously a lot of really great Index Co-op community members already. And then 1 Set Labs representative. I don't know who that's going to be. Maybe it ends up being me. I don't know. But definitely, the Set Labs team is pretty big now. So I'm sure they'll be able to find someone there. But anyway, I'm going to leave it at that for now. Hopefully, I covered that quite well and kind of like explained it from an unbiased view as possible. As I said, I'm involved with like a lot of moving parts here, but still really, I guess like it's still cool to see these things playing out because at the end of the day, other DAOs can learn from this because I'm sure other DAOs are going to run into these kind of issues. I mean, we saw it happen with Yearn Finance even where a lot of, they ended up printing more Wi-Fi tokens because essentially what ended up happening was that Andre launched the protocol, but all the tokens were distributed within the first 2 weeks. And that left none for kind of like paying out early contributors. And what ended up happening is that they had to rely on fees being generated by the protocol to pay contributors, and it wasn't enough. And they weren't rewarding people what they were owed, and then they just ended up printing more. Maybe that's what happens with Index Corp. Who knows? But I think that what they proposed here is probably the better course of action. Like redistributing the rewards, sharing the love a bit more than just like printing more tokens. But we'll have to see how it shakes out there. So speaking of the Index Corp, there's now a proposal to list the DeFi Pulse Index as a collateral asset on Aave protocol here. So essentially, you can go to this AIP or Aave improvement proposal and vote if you have, and then there's a link in here to vote. Sorry, the vote is here, not in the governance post. The vote is here, which will be linked in the YouTube description. But essentially, you can go vote and kind of make your voice heard that you want the DeFi Pulse Index on Aave. And I mean, as Stani says here, the pros are potential access to 12,000 DPI holders, essentially, unlocking basket liquidity because the DPI is obviously a basket of other assets and collects 20% reserve factor to Aave DAO. Cons, multi-sig on Minter, but restricted by the consent of either Index Corp and Set Labs here. And Stani says he's voting yes. And you can see here, I mean, pretty much everyone has voted yes so far. 0 tokens have voted no. And this is just a no-brainer for me. I think DPI is an amazing collateral asset. It has awesome liquidity on decentralized exchanges. It is made up of a lot of the top kind of like DeFi protocol tokens out there. And as Stani mentions here, it does have a wide holder base as well. So yeah, if you hold Aave tokens, go vote here. But it seems like this is going to pass anyway. So a few core dev things to actually get through, or core Ethereum protocol stuff that I wanted to get through. The first is from Nethermind, where they've said the wait is over, Warp has arrived. And Warp is an EVM to Cairo transpiler. Now, I've been talking about how Starkware's StarkNet is kind of like running on Cairo, their new smart contracting language. They didn't just like port straight from Solidity to StarkNet. They've gone with creating like their Stark OS and their Cairo language because they believe it's better, or it's like it kind of like does a lot of things better than Solidity. And what Nethermind has developed is a way to basically transpile your I guess like Solidity ERC20 contract to Cairo and then deploy that on StarkNet, which I think is, I mean, super awesome, right? Like, this just makes developers' lives a lot easier. It means that they don't have to rewrite their contracts, from Solidity to Cairo. They can essentially warp them, I guess, like in a way, by transpiling them using this transpiler that's called Warp from Nethermind. Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, Nethermind is an Ethereum core dev team. They built the Nethermind client, which is a really great Ethereum one client, so definitely go check that out. But there's actually a demo of it now, so a demo of transpiling an ERC20 Solidity contract to Cairo and deploying it to StarkNet. It's all on GitHub here, so if you're a developer, you can go check that out. But essentially, I think this is really cool because it shows that while Ethereum Layer 1 may be limited in what you can do because it's got just the EVM there and it's got Solidity, I mean, there's other languages like Viper and stuff like that, but generally, it's not like super flexible. At layer 2, you can be as flexible as you want because these layer 2s, as long as they're posting proofs to Ethereum layer 1, they can get away with doing whatever they want at layer 2 if constructed correctly. They can have different virtual machines if they want. They can have different smart contracting languages. They can have different architectures altogether, as long as they can still talk to Ethereum Layer 1 to post that proof, and as long as they can transpile things and be able to read the L1 kind of like balances and state to get users onto Layer 2, then they can essentially do whatever they want, which I think is really exciting because it means that we get essentially what was discussed, which was This was part of the ETH2 roadmap for a little while, but it got kind of like, I think, scrapped eventually because we figured it'd be better to do this at layer 2. But it was this, I can't remember what it was called. There was a specific name for it, which was essentially describing what I'm talking about, but doing them on shards instead of doing it at layer 2. But essentially, you can do the same thing at layer 2. That's right. They were called execution environments. And which is basically this concept of on different shards, you could have a different execution environment on each shard and be able to do all the things I mentioned, like code smart contracts in different languages, have a different virtual machine, not just the EVM and all that sort of stuff there. So it's really great to see that this is happening on layer 2. StarkWare, I mean, obviously one of the best layer 2 teams out there. StarkNet's going to be really big. I think, StarkNet is pretty much going to be their generalized, I guess, like layer 2 platform, similar to Optimism and Arbitrum, but built on zero knowledge rollups instead of optimistic rollups or ZK rollups. So yeah, really cool to see this. I'll link this in the YouTube description. You can go check it out and read all about it. So speaking of, I guess, like ETH2 and kind of like what's happening there and all the kind of like execution stuff, Proto put out a tweet thread today discussing, I guess, like, this is really kind of like a technical, low-level kind of protocol stuff. But essentially what he's saying here is that, I'll read out his tweet. He basically says, execution consensus API for just the merge. Why not for rollups too? Same API, which basically means you can have an EVM compatible rollup plus fork choice block insertion API plus API caller equals to or greater than a client agnostic rollup. So basically, what this means is that you can have a rollup that is agnostic to different kind of clients on there, whether that be like ETH2 clients or whatever. And then he goes on to say multi-client, state sync, proper state database, transaction propagation, extended client APIs, all for free. This is very technical stuff. I'm not going to go through it all now. I probably wouldn't even be able to do it justice because I'm not that technical. But and then he goes on to talk about sharding here when he says, and then this gets even better with shard data. Scale capacity for rollups 10 to 100 times, yet zero new execution requirements. No Explorer execution client EVM tooling aside from the merge API from plus rollup worker mode. Node, sorry, not mode here. And then he gives a kind of like an example here where essentially your data transport layer can come from Optimism or Shard node, future of ETH2 obviously, pulls in the transactions or blocks, loop over confirmed data and state routes, call execution consensus API to insert blocks, verify resulting state routes, and add finality, etc., supported by API out of the box. So this is basically the life cycle of like a transaction getting verified by the beacon chain, as I'm understanding it here. And then rollups can be so much more useful and sustainable with the native EVM, networking, client optimizations, updates, and infrastructure. And then this was really cool where he said, DeFi Lego blocks are cool, but have you ever thought about composable protocol Lego blocks? And then he goes on to describe that here. I'm not going to read through all of them. You can definitely go read this. But essentially, I think what he's describing is like a standard for rollups and I guess like the layer 1 and layer 2 to kind of like communicate with each other and verify each other without having to kind of like reinvent the wheel, essentially. That's what I think's happening here. Proto, if you're watching this, please correct me in the comments or whatever, or anyone else like who understands this probably maybe more than I do. Definitely, correct me in the comments if I got any of that wrong there. So ChainSafe's Lodestar team has released its official light client prototype, which cuts bandwidth and processing load by about 99% and makes Ethereum as light as ever. Now, for those of you who don't know what light clients are, it's kind of like this, this kind of like concept of can we allow users to kind of like verify the chain but in a really light way, essentially, like instead of running like a full node they can just run a light client and still have I guess like probably not like fully trustless kind of access to Ethereum, but essentially like up to a point where it's just very easy to kind of verify that everything's running correctly at the end of the day. And ChainSafe goes on to say, why does ETH2 need light clients? And they describe it here where they say Ethereum consists of thousands of nodes running various clients. Clients differ both in terms of the language they implemented in and their size. Running a full client on ETH2 means that you have to download the entire ETH2 blockchain. This is prohibitive for many environments and unnecessary for certain use cases. For example, a full node cannot be run on a mobile device hosting a trust minimized wallet. There are also many use cases that simply want to read a small piece of the chain. For example, fetching a recent validated balance or hosting a metered VM virtual machine for a blockchain bridge instance such as Chainbridge. In these instances, a light client is sufficient and preferable to a full client. In order to retrieve the latest state, Ethereum full nodes must download the Genesis or other beacon state and download and sequentially process every canonical block from start to finish. Using light clients, this bandwidth and processing load can be reduced by 99% here. So essentially, yeah, I mean, this is things for like mobile devices and making it so that you can have like your own little light client on there to verify the integrity of kind of like the blockchain without having to go through like a whole full node sync. Because obviously on your mobile phone, you're not going to be running a full node on it, and being able to run like a light client and still get that kind of like assurances, or at least similar assurances that you would get from like a full node, is very, very important. Now, this is described in detail in this blog post, so I'll let you guys go check that out. I'm going to power through the rest of this as we're running out of time here. Bartek put together a really great thread on L2s today where he said, after long discussions, we at L2beat.com ended up with a series of questions that we hope each rollup provider will be able to answer so that users will be able to properly assess the risk of their funds deposited into the rollup. And he goes through a bunch of different things, and these are all the kind of like things that all the rollups need to be able to either answer or give like I guess a stated plan to about how they plan to either decentralize these kind of functions over time, or the functions being like the sequencers, right? Obviously the block producers, we want more than one, because if there's only one sequencer, that sequencer can censor as many transactions as they want, which is obviously not ideal. And also things like admin keys and all that sort of stuff, definitely want to be able to kind of like get that out there. But other questions also that Bartek have come up with is like, are you using validity proofs or fraud proofs to secure on L1 to secure the state? What are the details? How can users be sure that you're providing what you claim to be proving? Transaction data will be needed for fraud proofs, emergency exits, etc. Where is the data stored? What entity is sequencing transactions, as I just mentioned? Is it permissioned or permissionless? Blah, blah, blah. There's all these questions here. It's a great set of questions, and I believe this is awesome. I'm really glad that the L2Beat team is kind of asking these and having it listed on their site too, because it's incredibly important that users know what trust assumptions they are making when using these rollouts. Because as I said, all of them are going to be, or at least most of them are going to be trusted environments for a while, because it's just new technology. There's going to be guardrails, going to be admin keys. It's not going to be decentralized just yet, but eventually we will get to that state. So knowing which ones are at that state and which ones aren't is going to be incredibly valuable for users, I think. So speaking of Layer 2, Rainbow Mobile Wallet is now supporting Layer 2 networks Optimism, Polygon, and Arbitrum. Polygon's POS chain, I should say. Not Polygon's POS chain is not a Layer 2, but the Layer 2s being Optimism and Arbitrum, and obviously a lot of us use the POS chain anyway. So this update allows you to access a whole new side of Ethereum as they kind of like put forward here. So if you have Rainbow on iOS, the Rainbow Wallet, go update it. You'll see kind of like support there. And they've got like a little kind of Twitter thread here, and a beginner's guide to Layer 2 networks as well, and kind of describing the difference between sidechains and Layer 2s, which I really, really like. So yeah, if you're a regular Rainbow wallet user, mobile wallet user, you'll definitely get a lot of use out of this for sure. Speaking of Layer 2s again, Alchemy has announced that they are now supporting Optimism. So Alchemy is similar to Infura, where they provide node infrastructure to kind of like different projects or different apps on Ethereum and on Layer 2s. And now Alchemy developers can get access to Optimism's massive improvements to gas fees and transaction throughput. And then you can like start using it by heading here. So if you're a developer, definitely go check this out. And the last thing to talk about, I think I'm going to spend a couple of minutes here. SuperRare have issued their token called Rare, of course. Essentially, they airdropped 15% of these tokens to people who had either bought or kind of like sold art on SuperRare, I should say, sorry. And you can see like kind of the breakdown here of their Rare drop method. And the Rare token is going to be used as a curation token. Now, for those who don't know, SuperRare is basically a curated art marketplace. Only around 1% of the of artists get whitelisted to end up on there to sell their art. So it's really, really high quality art. And as the name implies, it is super rare, right? So essentially, what the Rare token will kind of be used for is this kind of like space race that they're calling it, super rare spaces race or something. And basically, very similar to what Mirror does with curating kind of writers on their platform. You can essentially see this chart here, or I guess this graphic here, that shows the space approval process, where space candidates submit proposals, community editors and volunteers review them, the governance council submits edited and approved proposals for vote, token holders vote, and then it's either accepted or denied. So I guess like curation token is just a fancy way of saying a governance token. But I think there's a bit of innovation here, definitely, and I think it's really cool to see that. So yeah, I mean, if you had ever used SuperRare, you've got some tokens waiting for you. I already claimed mine and everything. It's pretty cool to see that, some of the big artists on the platforms got like a fairly sizable airdrop as well. And I kind of wrote a newsletter about this today called Culture Airdrops, where essentially, the people on here are maybe they're not even DeFi users, the artists that have been kind of, I guess, like selling their art on here or collecting the art on there, but they are kind of like NFT users or they're really into digital art. And there's a lot of culture in that. There's obviously DeFi culture, but it's a bit of a different thing there. So I called this like a culture airdrop, where these people were essentially they were essentially instrumental in bootstrapping SuperRare and kind of like buying and selling art and being part of the community. They've basically been airdropped these tokens as part of like setting that culture, which I thought was really, really cool there. But I think I'm going to end it there for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give that video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.